My Gwendolyn always said that every item has a story. It was this philosophy that became the foundation of our store, Treasures of the Past, in a quiet neighborhood in Noblesville. I am now 74, and when I look back, I realize that our store has become more than just a business, but a reflection of our lives. I met Gwen in 1969 when we both worked in the university library. She was cataloging rare editions, and I was a graduate student studying art history. I remember our first conversation about a shabby Keats volume with notes in the margins made by an unknown hand in the 19th century. "There's more poetry in those notes than in some modern collections," she said, and I fell in love instantly. We were married a year later, and in 2 more we had Rosamond, our little Rosie with golden curls and eyes the color of stormy skies. We loved her madly, perhaps too much. I realize now that our love was blind. We didn't see how our daughter was turning into a selfish person, used to getting whatever she wanted. When Rosie turned 15, Gwen and I finally realized our dream: opened a small antique store. We started small, a few display cases with porcelain figurines, old books and jewelry. The store became our third child, whom we raised with the same love as our daughter. "You know, Ames," Gwen said one day as she wiped down a Regency bronze statue, "these things will outlive us all. But while we're here, it's our job to keep their stories alive." Our daughter never liked the store. "Junk," she would toss disparagingly as she walked past Victorian clocks or collectible dishes. "Dad, you could do something more lucrative," she'd say, graduating from college with a degree in economics. "There's no money to be made in this dusty crypt." But Gwen and I knew it wasn't about the money. Every item that came into our store got a second chance, a new life. We were keepers of stories, not just sellers of things. Rosamond married, at 26, Peregrine Waverly, a financial consultant with ambition and a cold, calculating eye. At the wedding, I gave them a house, an old colonial-style mansion that Gwen and I had purchased as an investment. At the time, I thought the gift would bring us closer together. I was naive. "The house is in your name, honey," Gwen reminded me after the ceremony. "I insisted on it, remember? Just in case." I brushed it off, thinking her foresight was unnecessary. My Gwen always saw right through people, and I preferred to believe the best. Cedric Holloway had shown up at our store exactly 5 years ago, a short guy with wavy brown hair and attentive brown eyes. He was looking for a part-time job to pay for art history classes. "Mr. Baxter," he said then, nervously fumbling with the strap of a tattered bag, "I realize you may not have any openings, but I'm willing to work for minimum wage. Your store, it's special." The same fire burned in his eyes that I had once seen in the mirror. A passion for the past, a respect for history, a desire to touch things that have survived the ages. Gwen hired him that very day. "This boy is a real catch," she said in the evening. "Did you see the way he held that snuff box? It was as if he were holding not an object, but someone's life frozen in his hands." Cedric quickly became indispensable. He had an amazing ability to find rare items at flea markets and auctions. In addition, his technical skills helped us create an online catalog and attract new customers. Our store flourished. Every Thursday we had a family dinner. Gwen usually cooked. Her roast beef with rosemary was unbeatable. We'd invite Rosamond and Peregrine and Cedric. The contrast between them was stark. "Tell us about your new acquisitions," Cedric said, listening with genuine interest to stories about porcelain dolls or antique prints. "And how much did you earn from it?" Peters, Peregrine asked, barely concealing a yawn when Gwen told the story of the restoration of a Victorian secretaire. Rosamond usually rolled her eyes. "Mom, Dad, you should retire. This store is sucking you dry. Sell it, get a manager, live your life to your heart's content." But for us, the store was our pleasure. Gwen thrived on giving tours to school children, telling the stories behind each item. I, on the other hand, enjoyed the process of finding and acquiring new pieces. Together we created not just a business, but a true museum of living history. The illness came suddenly, like an uninvited guest. One morning Gwen complained of a severe headache. By evening she was paralyzed. The diagnosis sounded like a verdict: massive stroke. My Gwendolyn, so lively and energetic, was bedridden. "Ames, our 49 years together were wonderful," she whispered a week after the stroke. Her speech was slurred. but I understood every word. Promise me you won't give up the store. It's our legacy. I promise, squeezing her lifeless hand. Rosamond visited her mother rarely, always in a hurry, always with a phone in her hand. Peregrine came even less often, citing busyness. But Cedric was there every day. He brought Gwen fresh flowers, read aloud to her Dickens and Austen, told about the novelties in the store. "Gwendolyn, I found at the auction a set of silver teaspoons era of Queen Victoria," he said, sitting at her bedside. "Monogrammed B. Can you imagine B as in Baxter? It was as if they'd been waiting to get to us." Gwen's eyes lit up when Cedric was around. He was the only one besides me who didn't see her as a helpless patient, but continued to treat her as a wise mentor. One day when we were alone, Gwen struggled to take my hand. "Ames, Cedric has become like a son to us. The son we never had. Promise me you'll take care of him. And the store. Don't let Rosie and that husband of hers ruin what we've spent a lifetime building." I kissed her wrinkled hand. "I promise, my love." That night Gwendolyn died in her sleep, quietly and peacefully, as if she had just decided to turn the last page of our history together. I sat beside her, holding her hand, feeling her pulse gradually slowing until it disappeared altogether. The morning brought emptiness and silence. I stared out the window at the dawn, realizing that for the first time in 50 years, I was meeting it alone. A phone call snapped me out of my daze. "Mr. Baxter, I'm so sorry." Cedric's voice shook. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. You can't be alone right now." Rosamond called an hour later, her voice businesslike and collected. "Dad, I've made arrangements with the funeral home. I need to go over the details. And we need to talk about the store. We'll come with Peregrine tonight." Cedric arrived with a hot breakfast and a thermos of strong tea. He hugged me silently, and that hug was more supportive than 100 words of condolence. All day he was busy with organizational matters, calling clients, canceling appointments, accepting flowers and condolences that began to arrive as soon as the news spread through the city. In the evening, Rosamond and Peregrine arrived. The daughter was wearing a strict black suit, as if she was going to a business meeting, not to discuss her mother's funeral. "Daddy, we need to be rational," she said as soon as she stepped through the door. "I think the store should be put up for sale. You can't do it alone. I've already contacted a couple of potential buyers. I looked at them, not recognizing my own daughter. Is this really the same Rosie that Gwen and I used to rock at night? The same little girl who cried over a wounded bird? When did she turn into that cold woman with the calculating eyes? "Gwendolyn is not yet buried," I said quietly. "And you are already dividing the inheritance." "Dad, we're just being practical," Rosamond cut off. "Mom would understand." "No, my Gwen wouldn't understand. She'd be horrified to see what's become of our daughter." "The store is not for sale," I said firmly. "It was my and Gwendolyn's baby. I promised her I would keep it." Rosamond snorted. "Promises to the dead are worthless, Dad. Be realistic. You're 74. How much longer are you going to last?" "Mr. Baxter is doing a great job with the store," interjected Cedric, who had just entered with a tray of tea. "Profits are up for the third quarter in a row. We've even got customers from Europe." Peregrine gave Cedric a scornful look. "And who are you to meddle in the family business?" "Cedric is part of the family," I replied, surprised at the firmness of my voice. "He was by Gwendolyn's side until the last day, which is more than I can say for you." Rosamond blushed, but quickly pulled herself together. "Okay, Dad. We'll talk about it after the funeral. This is not the time for arguments." When they left, I sat in Gwen's chair for a long time, revisiting our happy years. Cedric was quietly cleaning the kitchen, giving me room to grieve. "You know, Mr. Baxter, Gwendolyn once told me that things outlive people, but stories only last if you tell them," he said before he left. "We'll keep her stories alive, I promise." I nodded, unable to say a word. I lay awake that night, imagining Rosamond and Peregrine selling off Gwen's collection, our life's work disappearing. No, I couldn't let that happen. Gwen had been right to warn me about them. Now I was alone against my own daughter, who saw her mother's death as nothing more than an opportunity to enrich herself. By dawn, I had made my decision. The store will remain mine no matter what it takes. I will protect Gwendolyn's legacy at all costs, even if it means going against my own flesh and blood. The day of the funeral was clear and inappropriately sunny. It was as if nature was unaware of my loss, continuing to shine joyfully. I sat on the edge of the bed, absently smoothing the non-existent creases in my black suit. It was a suit I had worn only twice before. At my wedding to Gwendolyn, where it had been navy blue, and decades later at my mother's funeral, when Gwen had insisted on dyeing the fabric black. "You'll be good as new," she said then, helping me tie my tie. Mom would have loved it. Now my shaky fingers couldn't do anything with the tie. There was a quiet knock at the door. "Mr. Baxter, may I come in?" Cedric's voice was muffled, as if he were afraid to disturb my grief. "Come in," I said, struggling with my tie. Cedric was dressed in a black suit that seemed too big for his lean figure. In his hands, he held a bouquet of white lilies, Gwen's favorite flowers. "Let me help you." He walked over and gently took hold of his tie. His fingers moved confidently, tying a perfect knot. "Gwendolyn showed me how to do it. Remember at last year's Christmas party?" I remembered. Gwen had laughed then, watching her teach that goofy boy how to tie a tie. "At his age, a man should know how to do these things," she'd said with contrived severity. "The limo will be here in 20 minutes, Cedric continued. "I checked all the arrangements with the church and the cemetery. All the floral arrangements have been delivered, and the programs for the funeral service have been printed. Ms. Fowler from the bakery had brought cookies for the wake, and the catering promised to be there by 3 o'clock. I nodded, feeling infinitely grateful. Over the past 3 days, Cedric had taken care of all the organizational matters, allowing me to immerse myself in my grief without the distractions of household minutiae. "Supperty, Miss Rosamond and Mr. Peregrine said they'd meet us at the church," he added, taking a step back and critically inspecting my appearance. "Of course," I muttered. "Where else?" My daughter hadn't spent the night at her parents' house in years, preferring the comfort of her mansion even on days like this. The mansion I'd given her. The drive to the church was silent. Cedric sat next to me in the limo, not trying to break my stupor with conversation, only occasionally putting his hand on my shoulder when he saw me start to tremble. St. Bartholomew's Church was filled with people. It seemed like all of Noblesville had come to say goodbye to Gwendolyn. You bet. In 50 years of living in the town, she had touched many hearts. Children who had grown up came to our store, mesmerized by Gwen's stories of Victorian dolls and medieval coins. Rosamond met us at the entrance, flawless in her black suit from a famous designer. She kissed me on the cheek, leaving a lipstick mark that she wiped off with a handkerchief. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked in that tone you use with little kids. "You look exhausted." Peregrine was standing behind her, looking at something on his phone. He looked up, noticed us, and tucked the device into his pocket. "Ames," he nodded to me. "We're sorry for your loss." "Ours." Like he wasn't married to my daughter, as if Gwendolyn hadn't been his mother-in-law for almost 15 years. Rosamond shifted her gaze to Cedric, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Oh, and you're here," she tossed. "The store is closed, I hope. I'd hate to see the shop open on the day of the funeral." "Of course, Miss Rosamond," Cedric said quietly. "There's a notice on the door that says it's closed for a week for mourning. I've also posted information on the website and social media. Customers are expressing their condolences." "How nice of them," she said sarcastically. "Come on, Dad. We need to get front row seats." The farewell ceremony was just as Gwen would have liked it to be, without excessive pathos, with music by Bach and Vivaldi, and a reading of her favorite Keats poems. I was asked to say a few words, and I stepped up to the pulpit, feeling the stares of hundreds of people. "Gwendolyn Baxter was," I stammered, feeling a lump in my throat preventing me from speaking, "was the light of my life. 50 years we walked hand in hand, and every day I thanked fate that she chose me. Gwen could see beauty in the most ordinary things, a shabby book, an old brooch, a faded photograph. For her, they were not just objects, but stories of human lives." I talked and talked, the words flowing by themselves, painting a portrait of the woman I loved more than life. When I had finished, there was silence in the church, broken only by muffled sobs. Rosamond sat with dry eyes, holding the hand of Peregrine, who glanced at his watch from time to time. Afterwards, Cedric asked for the floor. Rosamond tried to object, but the priest had already nodded, inviting the young man to the pulpit. "I only knew Gwendolyn Baxter for 5 years," he began in a shaky voice. But those years changed my life. She was not just my employer, but a teacher and mentor. When I first entered the treasures of the past, I felt like Alice in Wonderland. Each shelf held amazing stories, and Gwendolyn generously shared them. She taught me to see the soul in things, to appreciate not only their market value, but the stories they hold. Thanks to her, I realized that I wanted to devote my life to preserving those stories. His speech was short but sincere. I saw many in the hall nodding, recognizing the Gwen that Cedric was talking about. He returned to his seat with reddened eyes, unashamed of his tears. After the ceremony, the coffin was moved to the cemetery. The day was still inappropriately bright, and the sunlight played on the polished wood as if trying to brighten the gloom of the moment. I threw a handful of earth on the coffin lid, feeling a part of myself sink into the grave with Gwendolyn. The wake was held in our house. People came and went, offering condolences, sharing memories of Gwen. Cedric quietly coordinated everything, making sure the guests always had food and drink, making sure no one bothered me for too long. By evening, only the closest people remained. A few old friends, Rosamond and Peregrine, and of course, Cedric. I sat in Gwen's chair, feeling wrung out and drained. Cedric came over with a cup of hot tea. "Have some, Mr. Baxter. It's chamomile, just the way Gwendolyn liked it." I accepted the cup gratefully. My fingers trembled slightly and Cedric helped me hold it. "You were like a son to her," I said quietly. "She always said that." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm honored to hear it." She was an amazing woman. Rosamond, who was passing by, snorted, "Dad, don't exaggerate. Cedric is just a store employee, a good worker. No argument, but nothing more than that." Cedric backed away, his face closed. "Of course, Miss Rosamond, I'm just doing my job. And we appreciate your loyalty," Peregrine interjected, putting an arm around his shoulders in a gesture that was meant to be friendly, but seemed condescending. "But the family needs to be together now. Why don't you go home and rest? The last few days have been hard on everyone." Cedric gave me a questioning look. "Go," I said softly. "You've done more than enough. Thank you for everything." He nodded, squeezed my shoulder, and headed for the door. Rosamond gave him a cold stare. "Finally," she breathed as the door closed behind Cedric. "Papa, we need to have a serious talk." "Not today, Rosie," I said tiredly. "Please." "Not tonight," she insisted, sitting down across from me. Peregrine stood behind her with his hands on the back of the chair. "Peregrine and I have thought it over. You can't be alone in this huge house. And the store, it's too much for you right now." "I have Cedric," I objected. "He's helping with the store." Rosamond rolled her eyes. "Daddy, Cedric is a boy with no education who can't even tie a tie." "Are you really going to trust him with your life's work?" "No, we're offering a different solution. You move in with us. There's plenty of room in our house, remember? The house you gave us. And we'll sell the store." "Sell it?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, never. I promised Gwen." "Dad," Rosamond leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. "Promises matter when both people are alive. Mom would have understood. She would want you to be happy and not burden yourself." "Besides," Peregrine added, "the store is at peak value right now. We can make a substantial amount of money. It'll give you a comfortable old age, and the rest will be a good inheritance for Rosie. Everything stays in the family, you know?" I looked at them, not recognizing my own daughter and her husband. In their eyes, I saw not concern but calculation. "The store is not for sale," I said firmly, "and I'm not moving. This house is full of memories of Gwendolyn. I can feel her presence here." Rosamond tightened her lips. "Dad, don't be ridiculous. You're 74. You can't live alone. What if you fall or forget to turn off the gas?" "I'm in my right mind, Rosie," I countered, "and I'm physically strong enough. If I need help, I'll hire a nurse." "Ames, be reasonable. We're offering a reasonable solution. Selling the store, moving in with us. It makes sense." "Makes sense to who?" I asked, feeling the anger growing inside me. "For you, who will get money from the sale of my business? Or for me, who will lose the last connection with the woman I love?" "We are thinking of you," Rosamond exclaimed, raising her voice. "You're just too stubborn to realize it." I rose from my chair, suddenly feeling stronger. "I'm tired," and I'd like to be alone. Rosamond opened her mouth to object, but Peregrine put his hand on her shoulder. Of course, Ames. We understand. It's been a hard day today. We'll talk tomorrow, fresh in our minds. They left, but not before Rosamond threw me a look of annoyance. I could hear them fumbling in the hallway, putting on their coats. Their voices were muffled, but still distinct enough. He's so stubborn, Rosamond said. Like a child, really. Give him time, Peregrine replied. He's just buried his wife. Naturally, he clings to anything that reminds him of her. We haven't got time, Rosamond hissed. Have you seen him? He can barely stand. He'll go after his mother in a little while. And that's Cedric. He's obviously up to something. Have you seen the way he's trying to win his way in? He'll be the one to get Daddy to sign over the will to him. I froze, afraid to move so I wouldn't make my presence known. Don't be so dramatic, Peregrine said. Cedric's a small fry. As soon as your father leaves, we'll fire him and be done with it. The main thing now is to convince Ames to sell the store, or at least sign over the title to us. I'll do it, Rosamond said firmly. We can have him declared incompetent. At his age and after all that stress, any psychiatrist will tell you he's incapable of making rational decisions. That's my girl, Peregrine said with approval, always thinking one step ahead. The door slammed shut, and I was alone in the empty house. My legs gave out, and I sank into Gwen's chair, feeling my insides clench with pain. My own daughter, my little Rosie that Gwen and I had loved so much. She spoke of my imminent death as coolly as if she were discussing the weather forecast, and she was planning to declare me incompetent to get the store. I sat in the dark, going over memories. Here's Rosamond, 5 years old with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, asking me to read her a story. Here she is, a teenager, rolling her eyes at our outdated looks. Here she is in her wedding dress, radiant and beautiful. Where and when did Gwen and I make a mistake? When did our beloved daughter turn into this cold, calculating man? By midnight, I had made my decision. I will not let them take away the last thing I have left of Gwen. I won't let them trample on our memory and destroy what we've spent a lifetime creating. Gwendolyn had told me that Rosamond and Peregrine were not what they seemed. Now I'm convinced she's right. Tomorrow I will act, to defend what is rightfully mine, and let this be my last gift to Gwendolyn, the preservation of her legacy. The morning began with a phone call. I barely had time to open my eyes before the piercing trill snapped me out of a heavy sleep. The clock read 7:30, too early for a courtesy visit. Mr. Baxter? Ames? Cedric's voice sounded worried, almost panicked. I apologize for calling early, but I think you need to come to the store. Immediately. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What's wrong? Fire? A robbery? No, nothing like that. It's just, He hesitated, like he couldn't decide what to say. Please come. I'll explain everything on the spot. 35 minutes later, I parked the car outside the Treasures of the Past. The sign with the mourning ribbon swayed quietly in the morning wind. The window panes were draped in black cloth, a sign of respect for Gwendolyn's memory. Cedric waited at the entrance, shuffling nervously from foot to foot. Thank God you're here, he breathed as he unlocked the door. Let's go into the office. I followed him in silence, noting how neatly all the exhibits were arranged, how cleanly the floors were mopped, how fresh the flowers in the vase on the receptionist's desk were. Even on days of mourning, Cedric kept the store in perfect condition, just the way Gwen liked it. In the study, a small room off the main hall, Cedric closed the door tightly and pulled a folder from his desk drawer. I came back here last night after the funeral, he began, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to make sure everything was okay, and I noticed someone was going through the files. Here, take a look. He opened the folder and laid out a few sheets in front of me. They were copies of the store's documents: the ownership certificate, the lease agreement, the insurance. I immediately noticed an oddity. Some of the papers had my signature, but it wasn't my handwriting. Somebody had tried to imitate my hand, but they had done it very poorly. I didn't sign it, I said slowly, feeling my insides grow cold. I know, Cedric nodded. I've worked with you for 5 years, Mr. Baxter. I could recognize your signature with my eyes closed, but that's not all. He pulled out another document, a fresh one, on stamped paper, with shiny seals. "It's a request to retitle the property," Cedric said quietly, "in the name of Rosamond and Peregrine Waverly, with your signature, notarized." I took the document with trembling hands. Indeed, under owner was my forged signature, and under new owners were the names of my daughter and son. In law. They didn't even wait for Gwen's body to cool, I whispered, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. "How dare they?" "There's something else." Cedric looked genuinely frightened. "Yeah, I overheard a conversation. Yesterday when I was getting my things out of the dressing room, Ms. Rosamond called someone, talking about a competent psychiatrist who for a certain amount of money would be willing to certify your incapacity." I felt the blood drain from my face. So she really intends to carry out her plan. "She's my daughter," I said in a hushed voice. "She's my flesh and blood." Cedric knelt down beside my chair, looking me straight in the eye. "Mr. Baxter, I don't mean to speak ill of your family. But Gwendolyn warned me about this. She knew they would try to take the store. That's why she insisted that I be there for you, to help you." I looked at the young man in front of me, feeling infinite gratitude. Gwen and I weren't wrong about him. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling completely helpless for the first time in a long time. "I have a friend." Cedric stood up and began to pace the office. "Yvonne Price. She's a lawyer, specializing in just this sort of thing. She defends the rights of the elderly against unscrupulous relatives. If you'll allow me, I'll arrange a meeting." I nodded, feeling the shock of determination wash over me. "Call her, immediately." While Cedric was on the phone, I pored over the documents, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. It seemed Rosamond and Peregrine had been methodical, preparing the ground for the takeover of the store for a long time. I found drafts of powers of attorney, drafts of statements, even the outline of a business plan to modernize the store by selling off most of the collection. "Yvonne can meet us in an hour," Cedric said, ending the conversation. "At Martha's. She said she'd rather not be in her office, just in case." An hour later, we were sitting in the far corner of the cozy cafe, sipping strong coffee. Yvonne Price was a petite woman in her 40s, with a sharp eye and a determined chin. She scrutinized the documents we had brought, occasionally making notes in her notebook. "Frankly, Mr. Baxter," she said at last, "the situation is serious. Forging a signature is a felony, but it's hard to prove, especially if a good notary is involved. And judging from the seal, it's James Howard, who is known for his flexibility with the law." "What's your advice?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Yvonne tapped her pen on her notebook. "The first thing to do is to make a new will. A clear, unambiguous one, stating that your previous document, if any, is no longer valid. Secondly, you need an independent psychiatric evaluation to confirm your capacity. I know a reliable specialist. Third, you need to secure the assets that your daughter and son-in-law may try to seize." "The store," I nodded. "That's the main thing." "Not only that," Yvonne looked at me intently. "Do you have any other property they might be interested in?" I wondered. "Apart from the store and the house where I live with Gwen, I had a few investments, bank accounts." "The house," I suddenly remembered. "The house where Rosamond and Peregrine live. I'd given it to them as a wedding present, but legally it was in my name. Gwen and I had decided not to reissue the papers, just in case." Yvonne and Cedric looked at each other. "Are you sure you want to go this way?" Yvonne asked cautiously. "It could lead to a complete breakdown in the relationship with my daughter." I grinned bitterly. "What relationship, Miss Price? My daughter is planning to declare me insane and take away my life's work. The relationship is broken not by me." She nodded. "I see. In that case, I propose the following plan of action." The next 2 weeks passed in feverish activity. Yvonne helped me draw up a new will, where I clearly stipulated that the store should pass to Cedric's ownership upon my death. An independent psychiatrist, a solid man with graying whiskers, talked to me at length, conducted tests, and finally issued a report confirming my full capacity. But the big blow was to be the sale of the house. Yvonne found a reliable realtor who quickly and quietly found a buyer. A young married couple from Boston, moving to Noblesville because of the husband's job. The price was fair, the paperwork impeccable. All the while, Rosamond and Peregrine continued their game. They called regularly, inquiring about my health, inviting me to dinners, offering to help. I answered evasively, citing fatigue and a desire to be alone. Everything is going according to plan, Yvonne told me when we met at her office to sign the final papers for the sale of the house. The new owners move in 3 days. By law, they have to give the current tenants 30 days notice. But since it's legally your property, and Rosamond and Peregrine don't have a lease, they'll have to move out immediately, Cedric finished for her. Exactly, Yvonne nodded. Mr. Baxter, are you sure you're ready for the consequences? I signed the last piece of paper with a firm hand. Absolutely. That evening, Rosamond called and insisted on a meeting. Daddy Peregrine and I are worried about you, she said with feigned concern in her voice. You've locked yourself in the house. You hardly ever come out. It's not healthy. Why don't we meet tomorrow? Pick you up at 3 o'clock, have lunch at the Blue Clam, and then we'll show you something interesting. I could almost physically feel the falseness in her words, but I agreed. It was time for a decisive conversation. The next day was clear and cool. I waited for them on the porch, dressed in my best suit, the same one in which I buried Gwendolyn. Rosamond and Peregrine arrived exactly at 3 in a shiny new Jaguar. Achnar, Dad, you look great, exclaimed Rosamond, kissing me on the cheek. Don't you, Peregrine? My son-in-law nodded, shaking my hand. Indeed, Ames. Mourning suits you. I swallowed the comment that was on my tongue and sat down in the back seat of the car. The interior smelled of new leather and Rosamond's perfume. Too sweet, headache-inducing. Where are we going? I asked, noticing that Peregrine wasn't turning toward the restaurant. Chumadum. Surprise, Rosamond smiled, turning to me. We have something special to show you. 15 minutes later, we pulled up to Treasures of the Past. The store was closed, mourning ribbons still hanging from the sign. Why are we here? I was worried. Come on, Daddy, Rosamond took my hand. We have a present for you. They led me inside. Everything looked the same. Neat display cases, an antique clock ticking quietly in the corner, the collection of porcelain figurines that Gwen loved so much. Except there was a large envelope on the receptionist's desk, clearly waiting for me. What is it? I asked, though I already had an idea. Rosamond smiled a smile that I could now see through. Open it and you'll find out. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside were the papers for the reissue of the store in the name of Rosamond and Peregrine Waverly, and a report from a Dr. Morgan about my incipient dementia and inability to manage the business. It's all settled, Papa, Rosamond said sweetly. You have nothing more to worry about. We'll take over the store, all the worries, all the responsibility. All you have to do is sign. And then what happens to the store? I asked, surprised at my own calmness. Peregrine coughed. Well, you know, Ames, times are changing. The antiques market isn't as stable as it used to be. We're planning a little restructuring. Sell off the collection, I clarified. Only obsolete exhibits, hastily assured Rosamond. We'll keep the most valuable things and turn the space into something more modern. Maybe a coffee shop with antique elements. Something trendy, something that would appeal to a younger crowd. I carefully put the papers back in the envelope. What if I refuse to sign? Rosamond's smile froze. Dad, don't be stubborn. Dr. Morgan has already given his opinion. You don't really know what's going on. We just want to help. Help yourself. I looked into my daughter's eyes. Not me. Peregrine stepped forward, his face darkening. Look, Ames, we're trying to resolve this peacefully, but if you keep being stubborn, we're going to have to go to court. Dr. Morgan's report is just the first step. You're not going to win this case. I was silent, studying the faces of my daughter and son-in-law. How could I have ignored this greed and calculation all these years? All right, I finally said. You win. I'll sign it. Rosamond glowed. Papa, I knew you'd understand. It's for your own good, really. She handed me a pen, but I shook my head. Not here. We'll go to your house. I wanted to be solemn. After all, I'm handing over my life's work. Peregrine looked suspicious, but Rosamond clapped her hands together. That's a great idea. I'll open that champagne we brought back from France. Such a moment should be celebrated. We left the store and got into the car. Rosamond was in high spirits, not stopping to talk about her plans to modernize the store. Peregrine was silent, concentrating on the road. As we pulled up to their house, Rosamond suddenly noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. "Who's that?" She frowned. "Peregrine, are you expecting someone?" My son-in-law shook his head, parking next to the unfamiliar car. "I have no idea." We got out, and at that moment 3 people came out of the house. A young couple in their 30s and a respectable man in a business suit. "Mr. and Mrs. Waverly?" The man addressed Rosamond and Peregrine. "I'm Jeffrey Wilkins, attorney for the Norton family. They are the new owners of this house." "What nonsense is this?" Peregrine exclaimed. "What owners? This is our house." The man handed him a folder of papers. "I'm afraid not, sir. The house belongs to Mr. Ames Baxter, who sold it to the Norton family 3 days ago. Here are all the necessary documents." Rosamond turned pale and turned to me. "Dad? What? What does that mean?" I straightened, suddenly feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "It means, darling, that you have 24 hours to pack up and vacate the premises. The new owners want to move in as soon as possible." Peregrine looked at the paperwork, his face bloodshot. "You can't do that. We've lived here for 15 years. In the house I gave you," I replied calmly. "But it had always been my property. Gwen insisted on it." "Just in case," she said. As you can see, the occasion had come. Rosamond grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Is this about the store? You can't kick us out of our own house." I pulled my hand free. "I can." And I did. "Just like you could declare me incompetent and take away my life's work." "The apple of the tree, Rosie." She flushed. "You'll regret this. We'll sue." "I wouldn't advise it." I shook my head. "I have copies of all the documents you forged, and a psychiatrist's report, a real psychiatrist, about my full legal capacity. If you go to court, I'll be forced to countersue you for fraud and forgery." Peregrine grabbed his wife by the shoulders, keeping her from lunging at me. "Rosie, calm down. We'll find another way." She pulled away, looking at me with hatred. "You think you've won? Mother's store will be ours now? Sooner or later. You can't protect it forever." "Semwa Urina, we'll see." I turned to the Norton couple, who were awkwardly watching the family scene. "I apologize for the spectacle. The house is in excellent condition. You've made a good purchase. Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, by law, you have 24 hours to evict. The Norton family is willing to grant you an additional 48 hours as a courtesy, but no more than that." Rosamond opened her mouth to say something, but Peregrine pulled her back to the car. "We understand. Thank you for your indulgence." I watched them get into their Jaguar as Rosamond gave me one last look of anger and resentment. The car sped off, leaving a streak of rubber on the pavement. "That was dramatic," Jeffrey said, adjusting his tie. "Family matters often are," I shrugged. "Again, I apologize." Back home in the cab, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and bitterness. I had protected Gwen's legacy, but at the cost of finally breaking up with my only daughter. However, as I now realized, that break had happened much earlier. I just didn't want to see it. Cedric was waiting for me outside the house, shuffling nervously from foot to foot. "How did it go?" he asked, helping me out of the car. "About as well as we expected," I answered, feeling suddenly tired. "She said the store would still be theirs, that I wouldn't be able to protect it forever." Cedric squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, Mr. Baxter. We'll protect it together, just like Gwendolyn wanted us to." I nodded, feeling my eyes fill with tears. For the first time in a long time, it was not tears of grief, but tears of gratitude, for having at least one person left in my life that I could truly trust. After the confrontation with my daughter and son-in-law, I realized I had to act quickly and decisively. The store required serious protection, not only from the encroachment of Rosamond and Peregrine, but from any other possible suitors. Yvonne Price, who was now our permanent legal advisor, had drawn up a detailed plan for reorganizing the business. "We need to set up a trust," she explained, spreading out a diagram on a large sheet of paper in front of us. We sat in the store's office, drinking strong tea from vintage cups from Gwen's collection. An irrevocable trust into which you will transfer the rights to the store. You'll be the beneficiary during your lifetime and after your death. She stopped talking, glancing at Cedric, who was carefully arranging the cups. After my death, the beneficiary will be Cedric, I said firmly. It was Gwendolyn's wish, and it coincides with mine. Cedric almost dropped the kettle. Mr. Baxter, I cannot. It's too much responsibility. Who else but you? I asked, looking him straight in the eye. Gwen saw you as the successor to our business. So did I. Yvonne nodded. In that case, we have a few documents to draw up. First, the trust itself. Secondly, a new company structure. I propose a limited liability company with you, Mr. Baxter, as the majority owner and Cedric as a minority partner and managing director. Managing director? Cedric asked, his face a mixture of shock and confusion. Exactly, Yvonne nodded. It would give you official status and the legal right to make decisions in Mr. Baxter's absence. Plus, it'll be harder to challenge the transfer of the business if you're already a partial owner. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures. Yvonne brought in 2 more lawyers from her firm, specializing in business law and asset protection. We set up a new corporate structure, renegotiated all the contracts with suppliers and the landlord, and updated the insurance policies. Cedric proved to be not only a great assistant, but also a man with a business acumen that I hadn't noticed before. He got into all the legal details, asked the right questions, and suggested sensible solutions. Franarum, you surprised me, I said one evening when we were in the store late, sorting through another batch of documents. I never realized you were so good at business administration. Cedric smiled embarrassedly. I took night classes in college. I wanted to be more useful in the store, not only in terms of knowledge about antiques. Gwendolyn knew that. He stammered, she even paid for my last session. I felt a lump come up to my throat. My Gwen, always looking ahead, always caring about what would come after us. She was wiser than all of us, I said quietly. Cedric nodded. She often said that things are just things. It's the people behind them that matter, the stories they hold. At that moment, the phone rang. Cedric glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Miss Rosamond. Third time tonight. I shook my head. Don't answer it. Whatever she wants to say, let her speak through Yvonne. After the incident with the house, Rosamond and Peregrine disappeared from my life for a few days, but then the calls started, first begging, then threatening. I stopped answering and asked Yvonne to mediate all communications. From her, we learned that Rosamond and Peregrine had rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Noblesville. The Nortons, the new owners of the house, allowed them to take their furniture and personal belongings, but insisted on evicting them as soon as possible. They're furious, Yvonne said after another phone call with Peregrine's lawyer. They are threatening to sue you, accusing you of mental instability, demanding compensation for the house. But they're empty threats. You're legally impeccable. While the legal reorganization of the store was underway, Cedric and I also went about our daily business. Despite the mourning, treasures of the past couldn't stay closed forever. A month after the funeral, we removed the black cloths from the display cases and reopened the doors to the public. The first day was emotionally difficult. Customers who knew Gwendolyn came not so much to shop, but to offer condolences and share memories. By the end of the day, I was emotionally drained, but at the same time, I felt strangely relieved. The store had come alive again, just as Gwen would have wanted it to. Cedric had been around all day, skillfully taking over most of the visitor interaction when he saw me getting hard. He instinctively sensed my condition and always found a way to defuse the situation or give me privacy for a few minutes in the study. In the evening, as we were closing up store, he suggested, Mr. Baxter, you must be tired. Why don't we have dinner together? I know a nice Italian restaurant nearby. I agreed, realizing that the prospect of returning to an empty house was weighing on me more and more every day. The restaurant was cozy, with dimmed lights and soft classical music. We ordered pasta and a bottle of red wine recommended by the sommelier. Over dinner, Cedric told me about his plans to expand the store's online presence. We have a unique collection, Mr. Baxter. People from all over the world might be interested. I was thinking of creating a virtual tour of the store, with stories behind each exhibit. Gwendolyn had mentioned such an idea once. I nodded, remembering how Gwen had dreamed that her and her antique stories could be heard by people from all over the world. "Call me Ames," I said suddenly. Mr. Baxter sounded too formal for someone who had actually become a member of the family. Cedric smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "Ames, I am honored." That night was the beginning of a new tradition. Twice a week we had dinner together after the store closed. Sometimes in restaurants, sometimes at my house, where Cedric was a good cook. He taught me how to cook simple meals, a skill I'd never mastered, relying entirely on Gwen's culinary talents. One day, while cooking a roast together according to Gwendolyn's recipe, Cedric asked, "Do you miss Ms. Rosamond?" I froze while slicing carrots. The question caught me off guard, but it made me think. "I miss the Rosamond she could have been," I finally answered. "The daughter Gwen and I had hoped to raise. But that woman, with her cold eyes and her calculating mind, I don't know her." Cedric nodded understandingly. "My mother used to say that children are arrows. We release them into the world, but we cannot control their flight." "A wise woman, your mother," I remarked. "Are you close?" "We were," Cedric answered quietly. "She died 5 years ago, not long before I came to your store. In fact, she was the one who instilled in me a love of antiques. She worked as a restorer in a small museum." I put my hand on his shoulder. "She would have been proud of you. So would Gwen." We talked a lot those evenings, about the past, about the store, about books and music. Cedric was a great listener and an interesting conversationalist. He helped me to cope with my grief not with trite consolations, but with sincere participation and willingness to share both the joy of memories and the pain of loss. 6 weeks after the sale of the house, the legal reorganization of the store was almost complete. Treasures of the Past was now a limited liability company, 90% owned by me and 10% owned by Cedric. All assets were protected by a trust, and a new accounting system made financial transactions transparent and auditable. Key. Now, even if they try anything, they won't be able to, Yvonne assured us at the final meeting. Everything is legally flawless. That same evening, when Cedric and I returned to the store after the meeting to pick up some documents, we were in for an unpleasant surprise. Standing near the entrance were Rosamond and Peregrine. Rosamond looked exhausted. Her always immaculate hair was sloppy, her eyes were shadowed, and her expensive clothes looked wrinkled. Peregrine kept his outward composure, but the tense line of his jaw betrayed his inner state. "Father," Rosamond stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We need to talk. Alone." She threw a dismissive glance at Cedric, who instinctively stood closer to me, as if protecting me. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Cedric," I replied, unlocking the store door. "He's a partner in the business now, and he has a right to know everything about past treasures." "Partner?" Peregrine let out a short laugh. "You made your errand boy a partner? Ames, have you completely lost your mind?" I walked calmly into the store, turned on the lights and turned to them. "If you've come just to insult me and Cedric, you can leave. If you have something constructive to say, I'm listening." Rosamond and Peregrine looked at each other. Then the daughter took a deep breath, clearly trying to contain her emotions. "Father, we came to apologize. What happened? It was a misunderstanding. We never meant to hurt you. We were just concerned for your well-being." "And that's why you forged my signatures and planned to declare me incompetent?" I calmly clarified. Peregrine stepped forward. "Ames, we were wrong. We admit it. But what you did was also radical. Sell our house, throw us out on the street." "Your house?" I raised my eyebrows. "As I recall, it was my house that I let you use, and I had every right to dispose of my property as I saw fit. We lived there for 15 years. All our belongings. Our lives. I let the new owners give you time to get your things," I reminded her. "What else do you want?" "Money," Peregrine said bluntly. "We need money for a new house, or at least a down payment. The bank turned us down for a mortgage because of the current situation." Cedric, who had stood silent until then, couldn't take it anymore. "Are you serious? After everything you've tried to do, you come and ask for money?" Rosamond turned to him, her face contorted with rage. "And you shut up. It's all your fault. You're manipulating my father, turning him against his own daughter. You think I don't see your plan? To gain the trust of a lonely old man so you can take over his business? Enough. My voice sounded unexpectedly firm, even to myself. Cedric had nothing to do with my decision. It was my choice. My response to your attempt to steal what Gwendolyn and I have spent a lifetime creating. Peregrine put a hand on Rosamond's shoulder, restraining her from further outbursts. Ames, be reasonable. We're your family, the only family you have left. No, I shook my head. My family was Gwendolyn. And you. You proved that bloodlines don't make people family. Family is those who are there for you in times of need, who respect your wishes and the memory of your loved ones. Rosamond stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. Daddy, please. We live in a tiny apartment. Peregrine has lost several clients because of this whole thing. We just need help to get back on our feet, and then we'll, disappear from my life until the next opportunity? I finished it for her. No, Rosie, I'm not giving you a dime. You're adults with good education and connections. You can handle it. Peregrine's face suddenly changed. The mask of politeness fell away, revealing a cold fury. You'll regret this, old man. We'll see who's who. And you, he turned to Cedric, you'll be the first one out of here when the store's ours. The store will never be yours, I replied calmly. You can consult any lawyer. Everything is immaculate. Rosamond laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh. Are you so sure? You think your paperwork will protect you? There are ways to get what we want, and we'll find them. Enough threats, Cedric interjected, pulling out his cell phone. One more word and I'm calling the police. We have surveillance footage. Threats are a felony, Ms. Rosamond. Peregrine took a quick look around the store, noticed the cameras in the corners and turned pale. Come on, Rosie. There's nothing for us to do here. He practically dragged a struggling Rosamond out the door. Before she left, she turned around. This isn't over, Father. We'll be back again. When the door closed behind them, I sank into the nearest chair, feeling my legs shake. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me empty and tired. Are you all right? Cedric asked quietly, sitting down next to me. Yeah, I tried to smile. I didn't think I'd ever hear such words from my own daughter. Cedric put his hand gently on my shoulder. They're just angry and scared. People say terrible things when they feel cornered. I shook my head. It's not that, Cedric. I've heard their real voices, seen their real faces. What they showed today is what they are. And you know what the saddest part is? I'm relieved, like I can finally stop pretending I have a loving daughter. We sat in the silence of the store, amongst the things that hold the stories of generations past. An antique clock ticked quietly, counting down the seconds of a new chapter of my life. A chapter in which there was no more room for those who betrayed the trust and memory of Gwendolyn. Do you know what Gwendolyn said to me before she died? Cedric said quietly. She said, take care of him, Cedric. He is stronger than he thinks, but he will need someone by his side. I promised her I would be there for her, and I would keep my promise. I looked at the young man, whose eyes were full of genuine concern, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My own daughter may have turned her back on me, but fate had given me someone closer to me than my own blood. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. We closed the store and went to dinner, leaving Rosamond and Peregrine's threats behind us. I knew they would still try something, but for the first time in a long time, I was confident that I could protect Gwendolyn's legacy, and myself. Rosamond and Peregrine's threats were not empty words. A week after our unpleasant conversation in the store, Yvonne Price called early in the morning. Her usually calm voice sounded anxious. Mr. Baxter, they filed a lawsuit, or rather, several lawsuits at once. I sat in the kitchen, setting aside my unfinished cup of coffee, and listened to Yvonne list the legal claims made by my daughter and her husband. They were contesting the sale of the house, seeking compensation for wrongful eviction, trying to void the reorganization of the store, citing my incapacitated condition and undue influence of third parties, meaning Cedric, of course. The most serious charge is the allegation that you are being manipulated by Cedric Holloway, Yvonne continued. They claim he used your vulnerable state after the death of your wife to gain control of the business. demanding a psychiatric evaluation and a temporary ban on any dealings with the store's assets until the court decides. I listened to all of this with a growing sense of bitterness. How far is my daughter willing to go in her greed? Does she really believe that she can declare me incompetent just because I don't do what she wants? What should we do? I asked, trying to stay calm. Prepare for battle, Yvonne said firmly. Their lawsuits are built on sand, but they can cause a lot of trouble. We need to gather all the evidence of your capacity, evidence of the nature of your relationship with your daughter and son, in law, evidence that Cedric hasn't pressured you in any way. Do you have recordings of conversations, letters, anything that might show their true intentions? I thought of the surveillance cameras in the store, the tape of our last conversation, where Peregrine had openly threatened Cedric and me. There is something, I said. Cedric will help me gather all the material. After the call, I immediately contacted Cedric. He arrived half an hour later, listened to my story about Yvonne's call, and sat silently at his computer to upload the surveillance footage. It's going to be okay, he said without looking up from the screen. We're prepared for this. Yvonne knew they would try something. I watched his focused face, the confident movements of his fingers on the keyboard, and felt strangely calm. Who would have thought that in my 74 years, I would be looking for support from a young man I'd only known for 5 years? And yet Cedric became my support, not because I was weak, but because he was strong where I needed help. Darn it, they're trying to discredit you, I said when he was done with the files, to paint you as a cunning manipulator after a lonely old man's inheritance. Cedric looked up, his face serious. I know. I expected that. People often see in others what they see in themselves. The next 2 weeks became a legal marathon. Cedric and I met regularly with Yvonne and her team, submitting documents, testifying for preliminary hearings. Rosamond and Peregrine hired Harrison Bradley, a well-known attorney in town, specializing in family disputes and probate cases. The first court hearing was set for mid-October. Yvonne insisted I attend, though I would prefer to avoid seeing my daughter. Your absence will be interpreted as a sign of ill health or fear, she explained. We need the judge to see that you are of sound mind. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, a small room with wooden benches and austere furniture. Rosamond and Peregrine sat on the other side of the aisle, avoiding looking in my direction. My daughter looked impeccable, an elegant suit, perfect hair, understated makeup, a true businesswoman, ready to stand up for her interests. Peregrine, sitting next to her, seemed tense, his fingers tapping nervously on his knee. Judge Eleanor Montgomery, a woman in her 60s with a penetrating gaze and gray hair gathered in a tight bundle, listened attentively to the arguments of both sides. Rosamond's attorney began with an emotional statement about a helpless widower victimized by a cunning trickster. He described me as a grief-stricken old man, unable to make rational decisions after the death of his wife. He interpreted Cedric as a calculating manipulator who took advantage of my vulnerability to take over the family business. Your Honor, Bradley said, pacing the bench, Ms. Waverly simply wants to protect her father and the family legacy. Isn't it suspicious that just weeks after Mrs. Baxter's death, her husband suddenly disinherits his only daughter, transfers 10% of the family business to an outsider, and sells the house where his daughter and son, in law, had lived for 15 years? When it was Yvonne's turn, she rose from her seat with the quiet confidence I had come to appreciate in her. Your Honor, she began, my colleagues have presented you with a heartwarming story of a helpless old man and a conniving villain. Let me give you the facts. She methodically laid out the chronology of events, beginning with Rosamond and Peregrine's attempts to forge my signature on the store reissue documents. Then the surveillance videos were shown, including the one where Peregrine openly threatens me and Cedric. Particularly impressive was a video of Rosamond talking about plans to declare me incapacitated in order to gain control of the business. I watched Rosamond and Peregrine's faces change as Yvonne presented proof after proof. My daughter turned pale, then red with anger. Peregrine sat with his head down, his shoulders slumped. Besides, Yvonne continued, Mr. Baxter had undergone an independent psychiatric evaluation that confirmed his full capacity. The report of Dr. Richardson, one of the state's leading gerontopsychiatrists, is in the case file. Judge Montgomery looked at the documents carefully, then turned to me. Mr. Baxter, I'd like to hear from you. Why did you decide to sell the house where your daughter lived? I stood up, feeling the stares of everyone in the room. Your Honor, this house has always remained my property. I allowed Rosamond and her husband to live there, but I never transferred ownership to them. When I discovered that they were trying to take the store that my late wife and I had spent a lifetime building, I decided to protect my property. Selling the house was, uh, retaliatory, perhaps harsh, but legal. The judge nodded. What about the allegations that Mr. Holloway is exerting undue influence on you? I glanced at Cedric, who was sitting next to Yvonne, his face calm and open. Cedric had worked with us for 5 years. My wife saw him as someone who shared our passion for antiques and the stories that vintage items hold. He was there for us when Gwendolyn was sick, reading books to her, telling her about new items in the store. He supported me through the hardest days after her death, not because he wanted a stake in the business, but because he truly cared. About the store, about Gwendolyn's legacy, about me. I shifted my gaze to Rosamond, who was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite make out. A mixture of anger, resentment, and something else that looked like regret. My daughter and her husband, on the other hand, saw Gwendolyn's death as an opportunity. An opportunity to get something that didn't belong to them, that they hadn't earned through their labor and care. They didn't grieve for the woman who had raised Rosamond. They were planning how to share her legacy. And when I got in their way, they decided to declare me insane. There is silence in the courtroom. Judge Montgomery looked at me, then at Rosamond and Peregrine. Thank you, Mr. Baxter. You may be seated. Bradley's lawyer tried to challenge the authenticity of the videotapes, but the expert confirmed that they had not been edited. Rosamond was called to testify, but she seemed unconvinced, confused in her explanations, and unable to answer Yvonne's questions about the forgery directly. By the end of the hearing, even I could see that the case was moving in our favor. Judge Montgomery recessed to rule on the preliminary hearing. In the courtroom hallway, Yvonne looked confident. It's going well. I think the judge will deny their motion for a temporary injunction and schedule a full hearing for a later date. But I doubt they'll get to it. Their position is too weak. Cedric stood a little aside, giving us a chance to discuss the details with Yvonne. Suddenly, I noticed Rosamond approaching him. I tensed, ready to intervene, but decided to observe. Are you happy with yourself? I heard her cold voice. Destroying your family, turning your father against his own daughter. All for money. Cedric looked at her calmly. Ms. Rosamond, I didn't destroy anything. You did it yourself when you decided that your father's wishes and the memory of your mother meant nothing compared to your ambition. Rosamond grinned. How noble. Playing the part of the caring son? Let me guess, your own family has abandoned you. I saw Cedric flinch slightly, but his voice remained steady. My mother died 5 years ago. My father left when I was 3, but I have a sister, her husband, 2 nephews, and your parents have become family to me, not by blood, but by spirit. How touching, Rosamond looked back at me, noticing that I was watching them. Enjoy your victory while you can. It's not over yet. She walked away, taking Peregrine under her arm, who'd been standing off to the side talking on his phone the whole time. Cedric came over to me, his face a look of concern. Are you all right? Yes, I answered. Are you? He nodded. It's hard to see such anger, especially from the person who should be closest to you. When the hearing resumed, Judge Montgomery did not hesitate to make a decision. Having considered the evidence presented, I deny the plaintiff's motion for a temporary restraining order against the defendant's assets. The request for a compulsory psychiatric evaluation is also denied, as Mr. Baxter has already undergone one voluntarily, and the results do not give reason to doubt his competency. She paused, looking around the room. As for the claim for invalidation of the sale of the house, I also find no grounds for granting this claim. The documents prove that Mr. Baxter was the sole legal owner of the property and had the full right to dispose of it as he saw fit. Rosamond let out a quiet cry of indignation, but Peregrine put his hand on her shoulder, calling for silence. The judge continued. However, I feel it is important to note that family conflicts such as this are rarely resolved in court to the satisfaction of all parties. I strongly encourage the parties to consider mediation to resolve the remaining differences. The hearing is adjourned. Yvonne turned to us, smiling. Congratulations, we've won the first round, and likely the last. After this decision, their lawyer, if he's competent enough, will advise them not to continue the litigation. I watched Rosamond and Peregrine hurriedly leave the courtroom without looking in our direction. My daughter held herself upright, but I could see her shoulders tense, her hands trembling. In that moment, I felt not the satisfaction of victory, but deep fatigue and sadness. How had we gotten to this point? At what point had my own daughter become a stranger, ready to trample her mother's memory for money? Don't think about them now, Cedric said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. You did everything you could. You protected Gwendolyn's legacy. I nodded, grateful for his support. The day after the trial, the local newspaper published a short article about our case. Nothing sensational, just a dry report of the hearing and the judge's decision. But it was enough to get Noblesville talking about the Baxter War. In a small town, such stories spread quickly, fostering speculation and exaggeration. Some of the store's customers were delicately curious about the situation, but most simply expressed support. Many remembered Gwendolyn, her kindness and enthusiasm, and could not believe that Rosamond, whom they remembered as a child, could do such a thing. A week after the trial, Cedric came to the store with an unusual proposal. Ames, I would like to invite you to dinner. This Saturday, at my sister Daphne's. I was surprised. Your sister? But, why? Cedric looked a little confused. You see, Daphne and her husband Noel have wanted to meet you for a long time. I've told them a lot about you and Gwendolyn, and now, after everything that's happened, I think it would be good for you to spend the evening in a family circle. A real family circle. I hesitated. On the one hand, the thought of meeting strangers made me uncomfortable. On the other, I was touched by Cedric's offer and his willingness to introduce me to his family. All right, I finally agreed. I'd be happy to meet your sister. The house of Daphne and Noel Foster turned out to be a cozy two-story mansion in the suburbs of Noblesville. The neat lawn, the children's swings in the yard, the beds of fall flowers. It looked so homey that I felt a pang of nostalgia for the time when Gwen and I had just moved into our house. Cedric parked the car, and we headed for the entrance. The door swung open before we could even ring the bell, and a young woman appeared on the doorstep, looking just like Cedric, the same brown hair, the same attentive brown eyes. You must be Ames, she exclaimed, smiling so genuinely that it was impossible not to smile back. I am Daphne, the sister of the rascal. Come in, come in. Noel had just opened the wine. I was a bit taken aback by such a warm welcome, but obediently entered the house where we were greeted by a tall man with a friendly smile and two children, a boy of about 10 and a girl of about 7. This is Noel, my husband, Daphne introduced. And these tomboys are Oliver and Mabel. Uncle Cedric, shouted the girl, rushing to him. Did you bring me the book you promised? Cedric picked up his niece in his arms. Of course, princess. And even better, I brought someone who knows more about ancient things than all the books put together. Mabel stared at me with undisguised curiosity. Really? Have you ever seen a knight's sword? I have, I smiled. I've even held it in my hands. Wow, the girl exhaled in admiration. And the crown of a princess? Haha, and the princess crown too, I confirmed, remembering the Edwardian tiara that Gwen and I had bought at an auction a few years ago. The evening passed in a relaxed atmosphere. We sat around a large table laden with home-cooked meals. Roast beef, baked potatoes, fresh salad. Daphne was as good a cook as Cedric, or maybe she had taught her brother to cook. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. Noel, who worked as a history teacher at the local school, asked me about antique books. Daphne, a ceramic artist, shared her creative plans. The children listened with rapt attention to my stories of antiquities, their eyes lighting up at every mention of knights, pirates, or princesses. Cedric has told us so much about you and Gwendolyn, Daphne said as the children ran off to play, and we were left at the table with glasses of wine. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet her. From what Cedric told me, she was an amazing woman. She was, I nodded, my throat tightening at the memory. You know, Daphne continued, looking at her brother fondly, when our mom died, Cedric was completely lost. But then he found your store, met you and Gwendolyn, and he was himself again. More than himself, he blossomed. You gave him what Noel and I couldn't, for all we wanted. Guidance, purpose, a sense of belonging to something bigger. I was touched by her words. All this time I thought it was Cedric helping me, but it turned out that our connection was mutual, that Gwen and I had given him something too. My mother always said, Cedric said softly, that a true family is not the one you are born into, but the one you create through your actions and your love. A wise woman was your mother, I remarked. That's what Cedric's all about, Noel laughed. Always finding the most interesting people and drawing them into his orbit. A talent, I'll tell you that. When it was time to leave, I found I didn't want to leave this warm house. The kids insisted I come back very, very soon and tell them more stories. Daphne handed me a container of leftover roast and gave me a big hug goodbye. You're always welcome in our home, Ames, she said. Always. I sat in silence on the way home, digesting the evening's experiences. Cedric was driving beside me, whistling a tune. Thank you, I said at last, for tonight, for meeting your family. You're welcome, he smiled. They've wanted to meet you for a long time. And frankly, I wanted you to get to know them too. I looked out the window at the houses, lit by the warm light of the windows, and thought about the strange twists and turns of fate. How of all people, Cedric, an outsider not related to me by blood, had been the one to support me through the most difficult time of my life. How his family accepted me with an open heart, while my own daughter tried to take everything away from me. You know, I said thoughtfully, your mom was right. A real family isn't necessarily the one you're born into. Yes, Cedric nodded, and sometimes the most unexpected people are closer than your own blood. We pulled up in front of my house and Cedric turned off the engine. I'll see you at the store tomorrow? He asked. Sure, I smiled. Maybe next Saturday we can have dinner at Daphne's again. I promised Mabel I'd tell her about the princess's tiara. Cedric laughed. She'll be thrilled, so will Daphne. She's already planning the menu for the next 3 meetings. I got out of the car, feeling strangely peaceful. I may have lost my daughter, or rather, I realized I'd lost her a long time ago. But I had gained something equally precious, a new family bound not by blood ties, but by mutual respect, care, and shared values. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that life goes on, that there are many bright days ahead, despite all the losses and disappointments. The seasons were changing each other in their unchanging cycle. Crimson fall gave way to snowy winter, then came the timid spring, and now the hot summer spilled its golden light over the streets of Noblesville. It had been exactly a year since I had buried Gwendolyn. A lot had changed in my life in that year. After the court victory over Rosamond and Peregrine, there was a lull. They no longer tried to challenge my decisions or demand a share in the store. According to Yvonne, with whom we kept in touch, they moved into another apartment, a little more spacious than the old one, in a new neighborhood in town. Peregrine found a job at a small investment company. Rosamond got a job at a travel agency. They were trying to start a new life, and I wasn't getting in their way. Treasures of the Past, meanwhile, was thriving. Cedric gradually took on more and more responsibility, and I enjoyed watching his management skills grow. He created a new website with a virtual tour of the store, installed a more modern accounting system, and expanded the customer base to include collectors from other states and even overseas. Look at this, Ames, he said one morning, showing me a fresh printout of the financial report. Our profits are up 28% over last year. I looked over the numbers, impressed with the results. That's amazing, Cedric. Gwen would be so proud. He shrugged modestly. It's all your drills, and the collection you and Gwendolyn have gathered over the years. I just modernized the processes a bit, but I knew it wasn't just about modernization. Cedric had inherited a special gift from Gwendolyn, the ability to see the stories behind things and pass that love on to clients. He gave tours to school children, talking about the Victorian era through the objects of everyday life of the time. He organized thematic exhibitions, the art of writing, with a collection of antique pens and inkwells, ladies' secrets with Victorian boxes and cosmetics. Each such event attracted new visitors, many of whom became regular customers. I still came to the store every day, but now more as a consultant than a supervisor. I enjoyed socializing with the regulars, sharing stories about the origins of particularly interesting pieces, and helping Cedric evaluate new acquisitions. But I gradually handed over the day-to-day management to him as I watched him confidently take over the reins. Evenings were often spent with my new family. Daphne and Noel made me an honorary member of their home. I even had my own chair at their dining room table and slippers in the hallway. Mabel and Oliver called me Grandpa Ames and always greeted me with delight, especially when I brought them little gifts from the store, an old coin for Oliver's collection or vintage hair clip for Mabel. "You spoil them," Daphne said jokingly. "Isn't that Grandpa's job?" I replied, enjoying my new role. Cedric, too, had changed this year. He became more confident, more likely to speak his own mind, even if it differed from mine. We learned to argue productively, to find compromises, to respect each other's views. And every such argument, every joint decision only strengthened our partnership. There were changes in Cedric's personal life, too. He began dating Eloise Parker, a young restorer whom he met at an antiques conference. Eloise shared his passion for antiques and often helped us with the restoration of particularly valuable pieces. "She is special, Ames," Cedric told me after their third date. "Just like Gwendolyn, she sees a soul in things, not just their market value." I was happy for him. Eloise turned out to be a smart, energetic girl with a genuine smile and a sharp mind. She blended easily into our little family, made fast friends with Daphne, and won the children's hearts with her stories about the secrets of restoration. On the day that was exactly 1 year since Gwendolyn's funeral, we decided to close the store early. Cedric was going to take me to the cemetery, and then we planned to have dinner as a family at Daphne and Noel's. "I'll take the car and meet you in 20 minutes, Cedric said, locking the register. "Eloise will bring the flowers directly to the cemetery." I nodded, having mixed feelings. A year without Gwen. A whole year without her laughter, without her quiet remarks, without her hand in my arm. The pain of loss hadn't gone anywhere, but it was quieter, deeper, calmer. Now I could think of her without a sharp attack of grief, could smile at our shared memories, could feel her presence in the store, among the things we loved together. While Cedric got the car ready, I decided to take a walk to the little bakery around the corner. Miss Fowler, the owner, was baking the best chamomile cupcakes in town, Gwen's favorite treat. I wanted to buy one and leave it on her grave, like I did on special occasions. The day was clear and warm, the streets of Noblesville filled with summertime excitement. Tourists snapped photos of the historic architecture. Children enjoyed ice cream. Elderly couples strolled by holding hands. Life went on as it should. After buying a cupcake and a beautiful box with a bow, I headed back toward the store. And then I saw her, Rosamond, standing by the window of Treasures of the Past, looking at the exhibits on display. She looked different than she had a year ago. Slightly less dressed, less perfectly coiffed, but still as beautiful, so much like Gwen when she was younger. I slowed down, wondering if I should turn the other way. But it was too late. She saw me and froze, clearly as unprepared for the encounter as I was. "Daddy," she said after a pause, her voice sounding uncertain. "Yeah, didn't expect to see you here." "I'm here every day, Rosie," I replied calmly. "This is still my store." She nodded, fidgeting nervously with the strap of her purse. "Of course. I was just thinking, it's the anniversary." "Yeah," I confirmed. "That's why we closed early. We're going to visit Gwendolyn's grave." "We?" she asked, and I saw her face tense up. "Me and Cedric," I explained, "and Eloise. And then dinner at Daphne and Noel's." Rosamond looked confused. "Who are all these people?" "My family," I answered simply. She flinched as if I'd hit her. Her eyes flashed with resentment, then determination. "Dad, I wanted to visit Mom today, too. Maybe we could go together? I think it's time we had a talk. A real talk." I studied her face, trying to understand her true motives. Over the past year, I learned to read people better, to see behind the words, their real intentions. And what I saw now didn't inspire confidence. There was no genuine remorse in her eyes, only calculation. "What do you want to talk about, Rosie?" I asked her bluntly. She lowered her gaze. "About us. About the future." "Oh, the store. I've changed a lot of things this year, Dad. I've realized things. I've been wrong. I've tried to pressure you, manipulate you. But we're still a family, a blood family. And what does that mean to you, blood family? My voice remained calm, though I was still bitter inside. It means we have to stick together. She took a step toward me. Support each other. Peregrine's in a new job now, and I've settled in. But it's hard. The apartment's small, the pay's small, so I was thinking, maybe you could help. It doesn't have to be money, maybe a job at the store. I could study, be your successor, like I was meant to be. That's it. The real reason for her sudden desire for reconciliation, not love, not remorse, not a desire to rebuild her family, just another attempt to get what's not hers. Successor? I asked again. What about Cedric? He's been running the store for a year now, and he's doing a fine job. Cedric is an outsider. I'm your daughter. The store should stay in the family. Cedric is not an outsider, I said firmly. He has become the son I never had. He takes care of the store, of your mother's legacy, of me. He's earned his place not by blood, but by loyalty and labor. And me? Her voice trembled. Didn't I deserve a second chance? I looked at my daughter, the woman Gwen and I had once loved so much, and I felt only weariness. Tired of the games, of the manipulation, of trying to pretend to be something she wasn't. Rosie, I'm going to be honest with you, I said quietly. You're not coming here because you miss me or because you want to reconnect. You're coming because you want something from me again. That's not love. That's calculation. And I'm too old to play games like that. Her face changed, the mask of friendliness falling away, revealing her true emotions: anger, resentment, disappointment. You're choosing strangers over your own daughter? This upstart has brainwashed you. Mom would never. Do not dare to talk about what would or would not do, Gwendolyn. My voice became harder. She saw right through you, Rosie. She knew that one day you would try to take away everything we hold dear. That's why she insisted on keeping the deeds to the house in my name. That's why she asked me to protect the store. From you. Rosamond pulled back as if I'd hit her. You're lying. Mom loved me. She did, I nodded. Until the last day. But to love is not to be blind. She saw what you'd become, and it broke her heart. At that moment, Cedric pulled up in his modest gray Toyota. He looked concerned, noticing me in conversation with Rosamond. Ames, is everything all right? He asked, getting out of the car. Yeah, I replied, turning away from my daughter. We're done here. Rosamond gave Cedric a hateful look. Enjoy your victory. But remember, blood will always be blood, and you will always be an outsider. Cedric didn't answer, just opened the car door for me. I got in, not looking back at Rosamond. When we pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. She was standing in the same spot, staring after us, a small, lonely figure against the backdrop of the store that would never be her home. Are you okay? Cedric asked quietly as we pulled onto the main road. I'm fine, I replied, wondering if that was really true. You know, a year ago this meeting would have broken my heart, but now I'm just relieved, like I've finally let go of something I should have let go of a long time ago. He nodded understandingly. Sometimes the hardest decision is to let go of something that hurts, even if it's a part of yourself. Eloise was waiting for us at the cemetery with a bouquet of white lilies, Gwendolyn's favorite flowers. She hugged me warmly, and the three of us went to the grave. The monument was simple, just as Gwen wanted. Light gray granite with her name, dates of life, and a simple inscription, Keeper of Stories. Fresh flowers, pink roses, were already at the foot of the monument. Rosamond had come before us after all. We arranged our flowers, and I set out a box of chamomile muffins. Cedric and Eloise moved away, giving me time alone with Gwen. I sat on the bench opposite the monument, looking at the name of the woman I'd lived with for 50 years carved in stone. Hello, my love, I said quietly. It's been a year, a whole year without you, but you're still with me, in the store, in our things, in my heart. A light breeze touched my face like Gwen's gentle hand. I saw Rosie today, I continued. She hasn't changed, Gwen, still as calculating as ever. Wanted to come back into our lives to try to take the store again. But I wouldn't let her. I kept the promise I made to you. The legacy is in good hands. I told Gwendolyn about the past year, the thriving store, the new family, how Cedric had exceeded all our expectations. He's so much like you, Gwen. The same passion for stories, the same attention to detail, the same kindness. You'd be proud of him. I am. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell sounded, marking the hour. I rose, feeling strangely light. I must go, my love. We have dinner at Daphne and Noel's. You'd love their family. Noisy, warm, real, like you and I have always dreamed of. I touched the cold granite with my fingers. I still miss you every day. But now it's a light sadness, not a destructive pain. You taught me to live life to the fullest, and I try. For your sake, for myself, for our legacy. When I returned to Cedric and Eloise, they were standing nearby, talking quietly. When they saw me, they smiled synchronized smiles, the two young people who had become my anchor in my new life. Ready to go? Cedric asked. Daphne sent word that she'd roasted your favorite duck with apples. And Oliver has a report on the antique coins you gave him, Eloise added. He can't wait to show you. I nodded, casting one last glance at Gwendolyn's grave. Yes, I'm ready. Let's go home. We walked to the car, and I felt the heaviness of the last year finally recede. I did not forget Gwen, did not betray her memory. On the contrary, I kept everything that was important to her, the store, the stories, the spirit of our life together. And I found what she had always dreamed of for me, a real family, even if not bound by the ties of blood. The store was in good hands. I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Free of toxic relationships, free of manipulation, free of guilt and debt to those who didn't deserve it. You know what the most amazing thing is? I said to Cedric as we got in the car, I'm finally at peace, real peace. And that's the best gift I could have gotten a year after losing Gwendolyn. It's what she would have wanted, Cedric said quietly, starting the engine. For you to be happy, for you to live your life to the fullest. Yes, I agreed, looking out the window at the trees outside, lit by the warm summer sun. That's exactly what she would have wanted. And somewhere deep inside, I felt that Gwendolyn was looking at us and smiling, satisfied with the way I kept my promise, preserved her legacy and found the strength to live on, surrounded by those who see value not in things, but in the stories and feelings behind them.